And we're live with episode 18 of a podcast for all seasons. We are going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy. So that's what this week's majority topic is going to be. We're going to talk a couple other things, corrections on some info on DC's animated and local cons and a few other things. Going to turn it over to my co-host, Eric Joseph, and let him give you the rundown on what we're going to be talking about this week. What's up, Eric?
Hi, Josh, and hi, everyone listening. This is Eric Joseph from DarkKnightNews.com, ComicBookMovie.com, and Multiverse Entertainment. And our first order of business today is to review the recently released Guardians of the Galaxy. Looks like it's going to have quite a strong opening weekend, projected to do 94 million domestic, 160.4 million worldwide, I believe. And at the time of this recording, I think it's 92% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes because, you know, what critics think really matters. But moving forward, I'll start us off with my own verbal review. I was really surprised by it. As release was coming closer, I was getting more excited by the TV spots and positive word of mouth. Obviously, they had enough confidence in the film if they already set the release date for the sequel in July 2017. In the past, I've said I wasn't impressed by the first two trailers. I thought they made the film look too comedic, and while it did have some laughs in it, it wasn't... The trailer framed it in a way where it seemed like they really put a lot of the bigger funny moments in the first trailer, and it just gave you this impression that it was going to be a laugh riot. And like I said, the characters were lovable, and Star-Lord he made us laugh here and there. It's just, I was really afraid it was another Iron Man 3, and it was not. And, you know, trailers can be deceiving. If you remember the first trailer for Iron Man 3, everyone thought it was going to be like The Dark Knight Rises, and it was going to have this grim, serious tone, and it was a complete 180 from that. So, I guess pretty much from here on out, we should judge trailers by the pretty colors and telling us who's in the movie. Not to get too sidetracked, but that's like the trailers for Interstellar, Chris Nolan's next film that's out later this year. It looks interesting, but is it just me, or does the trailer not really tell us what the movie's about? I can tell there's movement in the movie. I can tell it has actors in it, and I can tell that it's a movie. But I don't know. Chris Nolan seems to have a pretty good track record, so maybe I'll see that. But anyway, back to our topic at hand. Yeah, Guardians, I thought, was one of Marvel Studios' best movies, and I stress Marvel Studios because I think to this point, X-Men Days of Future Past is still probably the best comic book movie of this year. Of course, that's distributed by Fox, although it's a Marvel property. But we still have, you know, Sin City 2 and The Scribbler with Katie Cassidy, which looks awesome based on the Image comic coming this year, which I intend to see both of those. But yeah, Guardians is going pretty strong. I don't think I like it as much as Captain America the Winter Soldier. I mean, we obviously need more time to gain perspective on properly grading these movies, but yeah, my impression for now, Guardians is up there. Winter Soldier probably leads the pack, but it's up there with, you know, say, you know, the earlier Iron Man ones, maybe Avengers. And I still stand by Iron Man 2, but Iron Man 1 did have a lot of depth to it. As for the cast of the film, Rocket and Groot were the standouts for me. I know Josh wasn't as hot on Star-Lord, but I liked Chris Pratt. I didn't think Star-Lord came off quite as generic. I mean, there were some things that were a little cliche about the character, but I thought he brought great personality, and he went through a great, humbling hero's arc throughout the film. Gamora, was a little generic. Drax especially was generic, but he worked as a team. They really worked well together. I don't know if many of these characters would be able to support films on their own, but yeah, Drax was basically what I thought he'd be. Dave Bautista by no means is that skilled of an actor, but as a badass alien who would cut a bloody path through Ronan's forces, yeah, he absolutely did work. He played off the other characters rather well. Um, and they'll probably add a member or two to the crew in the sequel. As for the villain, Ronan, he was a pretty cool villain. Having Thanos there as well, which was sorry to use the phrase "pretty cool" again, but hey, it was. To see, the most powerful villain in the universe is always something great to behold. But when you have Thanos and then you have Ronan playing scenes with him, even though he got an Infinity Stone at some point, you kind of felt that Ronan was just second fiddle, and we're just working our way up to Thanos. So you knew Ronan was going down at some point. But I thought it was good that they gave him a little bit of backstory and why some of the Guardians had a vendetta against him. But the thing with intergalactic despots is their level of power makes them so believable that in a way, you don't need too much backstory to believe them as a threat. We have Ronan, we have Thanos, and then, if we're talking the DC side of things, you have Darkseid, Mongol, Despero. We don't need to see them fully fleshed out as, say, someone like, Two-Face or something like that, or, Ironmonger to, go back to Iron Man. But it was definitely better than, let's say, Malekith in Thor: The Dark World, who had zero depth. He was a bad guy there to do bad things. He might as well have had a neon sign on his chest saying, "I'm the villain." Maybe some stuff got left on the cutting room floor. I think a part of it is that they still want to focus too much on Loki. But, yeah, Malekith, not much depth in Thor: The Dark World. The same can be said about the Thor movies in general. Yeah, I think they're enjoyable, but they don't have a lot of depth to them. They're good action movies, but I don't want to get too much into Thor today. But I mean, I'll look forward to Thor 3 just like everyone else, but I want more substance from the script. But yeah, I'm definitely thinking that Marvel has a real hit in another franchise on its hands. As we said in our previous episode, it was comparable to Iron Man in the sense that we don't have anything before it to compare it to, because Iron Man was the character's first big screen outing with Robert Downey Jr. And likewise with this, so people they don't have another actor attached to their head that they could compare Star-Lord or Drax to, and that really helps. And this is a stronger opening for a first film than I believe we saw with Thor or Cap one. So that's another positive on its side. And you can't call it a solo movie since it's a team, but when we're placing it among Iron Man, Hulk, Cap, Thor, it does with no Iron Man 4 on the horizon, at least until after Avengers 3. This does give something Marvel can hang its hat on because let's face it, sequels tend to do bigger numbers, and I expect Guardians 2 to absolutely blow up the box office in 3 years' time. And then Thanos is something we're building and building to over years, and quite frankly, I really believe that Avengers 3 is going to be the Avengers and the Guardians teaming up against Thanos, which, in a way, too many characters, but, with the Guardians having 2 films by that, I think it's something moviegoers would really like to see. Certainly there are directors that can juggle ensemble casts well, and, frankly, it's going to take all hands on deck with these superheroes to take down Thanos. So that's, and when it's Avengers 3, you don't really want to call it a trilogy because there's going to be an Avengers 4 in some capacity, but you expect that you want to have something that's going to top the first two action and story-wise, and it'll just feel like a culmination of things. But I can imagine maybe if they have plush rocket raccoons out there, this film could be a merchandising monster as well. And James Gunn and company really deserve all the credit they get. Before I ramble too much, maybe I'll touch on a few other finer points here and there after Josh gives us his take on the film. But I'll give my score for now. I'm going to give Guardians 9 out of 10. So let's have your opinion, Josh.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the movie, and I think that first things first, I looked at this movie two different ways. I looked at it first as a film in the Marvel Universe and the way that it played into the Marvel Universe, and it definitely, it blew up that universe to a intergalactic level, for lack of a better way to put it. It made it so that it is now, a quite literally interstellar universe, and we see that the whole of this universe, I mean, all of a sudden, Avengers, it kind of seems, other than in the Thor movie, we knew that, yes, there's aliens, and we knew that, yes, it's not just the people of Earth and whatnot, but we didn't really have a full-scale perception that this is this gigantic universe, quite literally an entire universe, that has characters and it has villains and heroes and all of this other information and all these other things going on behind the scenes. This opened that up, and as a Marvel movie, I thought that it excelled in just increasing that universe, and it was a really, for me, it was a really good juxtaposition to some of their more serious films. If you look at, Winter Soldier, it was definitely a lot more serious in tone. I don't read the comic Guardians of the Galaxy. I haven't read any of their comic book source material, but a lot of people that I know that have read them, that the characters themselves are more comic in tone. So there's a lot more humor there. The character of Star-Lord, Peter Quill, he's supposed to be very, very tongue-in-cheek, a la, say, Spider-Man, very with the quips and the smart-ass responses and whatnot. And he nailed that absolutely. And I think that as in terms of a Marvel film, that it would probably be maybe second or third in my favorite Marvel film. I honestly still think that Iron Man is probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest, of the films that they've done. I personally love Captain America. I know a lot of people. I'm talking about the first Avenger. I personally love that film a lot. It has a lot of nostalgia, and we've talked about that before on the show. And I would rank one of those two films near the top. But with the recent hits that they've come out with, other than the original kind of individual character films that they've done with the ensemble things, like Avengers and Captain America and Iron Man 2 mixing in other characters, Winter Soldier was an extraordinary movie as a movie, and it was an extraordinary comic book film. And I would probably put that right up there with my top three at the least, maybe even tied for maybe spot 1 or 2. Avengers being a close second. I'd say maybe this is third. But as a sci-fi movie, and not seeing it as going in with the perspective of it being part of the Marvel Universe, I would rank this up there with some of my favorite comedy / sci-fi. So yeah, this is not going to rank up there with Alien in terms of pure sci-fi, but it's definitely going to rank up there in terms of, say, like Galaxy Quest, which is one of my favorite sci-fi slash comedy films, in that it's this standalone film. It doesn't need to have to tie into anything else. It's playing on a lot of universal movie tropes in terms of what it's giving us. You know, Galaxy Quest played off of the Star Trek. This is kind of the it's really like the adventure, find the MacGuffin film, where it had so many elements of other films. It had elements of Indiana Jones. It had elements of I honestly think of this team, Guardians of the Galaxy. Guess what they are? They're the intergalactic Goonies. And I think that the more that me and Eric have talked about it in the last few days, the more I've kind of developed this idea in my head. And we talk about character development being extraordinarily important in these films, and you don't necessarily need that with these types of archetypes. And what I mean by that is, yeah, Drax, do we need to know more than my mother, you know, my wife and my child were killed, and now I'm on a path for revenge? Do we need to know any more about that character than that for essentially the hulking brute? No, we don't. And he played the perfect straight man to the rest of the kind of comedy ensemble of, you know, Chris Pratt's Star-Lord and Bradley Cooper's Rocket Raccoon. Gamora kind of was the one who made you know, went from the hard to soft transition. She was that character. But, you know, I mentioned the Goonies. We don't really get a ton of character development from those characters, but the cast comes together. We see their kind of zany adventures, and we start to love them as a cast, love them as a group, and they're on this, you know, spectacular adventure with a great payoff. Well, this is exactly in that same vein. We have this, you know, cast that's slowly pieced together. Not any one of them has this exemplary backstory necessarily, or has this exemplary character development. But once we get them all together, we see their characters start to shine through in terms of who they are as a character and what they are in this film. And Eric nailed it on the head when he said that, you know, Rocket and Groot, they definitely were the standouts of the film. I honestly thought that Gamora was very much, other than the fact that it was a female character, and, you know, it kind of had that transition of, you know, redemption, which is a common theme amongst the types of characters that her character's kind of portraying. You know, she starts off as a quote-unquote bad person, and she tries to redeem herself by being a guardian of the galaxy, quote-unquote. But her character was very throwaway, and that's a little disappointing for me, because Zoe Saldana is a really good actress, and I've enjoyed her in the Star Trek movies. I wasn't a gigantic fan of the James Cameron film Avatar, but she did a pretty good job in that film as well as an actress, and I really thought that she didn't shine very brightly in this movie. Dave Bautista, didn't expect a whole lot from him. I got exactly what I was expecting, which was a guy who, you know, like I said, he was the straight man. His race takes everything literally, so he played the perfect straight man to Chris Pratt's, you know, sardonic, sarcastic, you know, assy one-liners, which he completely misinterprets to, you know, much humor. But Rocket Raccoon, that was the most interesting character to me, because I didn't really know enough about these characters going in. And I mean, it's kind of a funny concept that he's this genetically modified slash, you know, cybernetically modified raccoon, which was apparently an intergalactic crime, which is kind of hilarious. And until like the middle of the movie, when he kind of says, you know, I never asked to be this way. I didn't ask to be torn apart and put back together a dozen times to become a monster. And I was like, man, I really feel bad for this poor little fucking raccoon. It was like the most emotional part of the entire movie. And that includes the part where Star-Lord watches his mother die as a child. It was more emotional than that. The harrowing tale of a genetically modified raccoon was more emotionally poignant. But Groot was definitely an interesting standout because he literally says nothing but "I am Groot" and "We are Groot" in the film, and just his persona was very humorous. The things that he does, you see that a gigantic, humanoid organic walking tree can be a very interesting character in terms of superpowers and all this other stuff. But as a whole, I definitely, the film was a hit. I mean, it was an enjoyable movie, and I think that that's something that is honestly dreadfully missing lately in cinema, is just a film adventure that you can go and see a movie. You don't have to know anything going in. You don't have to be extraordinarily invested in this entire universe of characters, although this does tie into the Marvel universe. You didn't need to see a single other Marvel film to enjoy this movie, and that's where they really succeeded, because they're not giving you this dearth of backstory which you have to know or understand or even appreciate in order to enjoy this movie. And I think as a film, this might be one of Marvel's more successful hits, outside of, I'd say, Captain America Winter Soldier 2, which I thought worked fantastically as like an espionage spy thriller, a la Jason Bourne movies. This is in the vein of sci-fi action adventure. It's kind of an Indiana Jones in space, but with an ensemble cast. Is it as good as Indiana Jones? No, it is not. Nothing's as good as Indiana Jones, but that the exception being Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But it was an extraordinarily enjoyable film. Yeah, did I think Chris Pratt was a little bit of a generic hero throwaway? I did. Same with Gamora. I thought that she was a little generic. Drax was generic, but I think he was intentionally generic, so I don't hold that against the film too greatly. But when your heroic lead is kind of a generic, oh, hey, he's assy, he's sarcastic, and he says quips nonstop. I mean, it works in the movie, and I'm really glad that the first trailer was a misnomer, that it was not a pure comic romp, because it was not. But they had just the right amount of humor, and that is a delicate balance of humor, action, emotion. It was a really enjoyable film. I would say I'd give it honestly probably an 8.5 out of 10. I don't know if I'd go as high as a 9. In 10 months, a year, am I going to go, oh man, I got to watch Guardians of the Galaxy again? I haven't seen that. Such a fantastic movie. I don't know that I'm going to feel that way, that strongly about it in a year's time or a few months' time. But was it an absolutely enjoyable film? Would I go see it again? I absolutely would. And I suggest that you guys go see it as well. Any other thoughts, Eric?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you kind of touched on it. It works as more than just a superhero movie. It's a great sci-fi movie as well. When I was watching it, I was kind of thinking, it kind of feels like it's a new Fifth Element in a way. It kind of feels like it's going to be an instant sci-fi classic. And I told you this the other day on the phone after I had seen the movie, and I'm saying this as someone. Green Lantern's one of my favorite superheroes. I'm wearing a Green Lantern shirt right now as we record, and I believe I've said on the show before that I actually did like the Green Lantern movie. It wasn't perfect, but it was an alright effort for having too many cooks in the kitchen. But this is the movie Green Lantern should have been. We shouldn't have been afraid to spend so much time in space, because this movie was on Earth for the first 5 minutes. Now, Green Lantern wouldn't necessarily have to be on Earth for that little time, but it really felt like in Green Lantern they were afraid to spend so much time in space, and they were touting that, oh, this is the Star Wars of the DC universe, and they didn't make it that. And I just loved how Guardians transported you to these other worlds and how beautiful they made. I believe it was called Xanthar, the home planet of the Nova Corps. It kind of looked Earth-like, but they did a good job of giving it its own identity in the cosmos. And sorry, just coughing a little over here. Might have to get a sip of water in a moment. But yeah, if Warner Brothers ever takes another crack at Green Lantern, take notes on this movie. Take notes on the wonderful animated films Warner Brothers Animation made, as well as Green Lantern the animated series. And they could have possibly had a hit like this on their hands, but I think that's pretty much going to do it for my thoughts on Guardians. But before we move on to our next topic, I'll let Josh give his closing thoughts on Guardians while I go get a drink of water.
Well, yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed the film. I highly suggest anybody who's got the time to go see it. Movies are expensive. It's like $10 for a ticket if you go to the 2D. It's a couple extra bucks if you don't. So catch a matinee, or if at the very least catch it at a local dollar show if you got one around your place. It is definitely worth seeing in the theater. It's got that very big cinema feel to it in terms of being one of those movies that you want to see in the theater. Blockbuster, for lack of a better word. This is definitely going to be a blockbuster for them. Eric gave you the rundown when we started. 160.4 million global. Now that's not an insanely gigantic global debut, but it definitely is for a ragtag team of characters that nobody knows. And I can't imagine that people are solely seeing this movie based on the fact that it's a Marvel film, but obviously that doesn't hurt. I was reading an article from Variety's Brent Lang, and he talked about how Marvel has become quickly, it's the most consistent hitmaker in Hollywood outside of Pixar, and that cannot be understated. So, I mean, if you know that you've enjoyed the Marvel films, you're definitely going to enjoy this one. Is it the best film of the year? We got a few months left. It's definitely one of the best sci-fi films of the year. I think that'll go down with very little dispute. I know that it's already beaten Lucy, which is really the other, speaking of The Fifth Element, which was a Luc Besson film. Lucy, which is a Luc Besson film, that is fell to 2 this week, and it dropped something like 50% or more, and it hasn't made as much in 2 weeks as this made in its opening debut week. So that stands to reason as a really pretty extraordinary factor, or factoid, if nothing else. But it's only going to get bigger as word of mouth really gets around. And an interesting fact, this is kind of an aside, I read in the same article that they intentionally held back about 40% of their marketing for the final week before the films open. So Disney decided to put all of their eggs kind of in the last week basket and say, okay, just advertise the shit out of this film. And that may have been successful. I mean, marketing can't be understated as well. But they really they hit every single nail on the head when making this film. I mean, aside from a few little misgivings here and there in terms of a couple little pacing things, which you need to slow down a big movie like this every once in a while, and a couple generic characters, it's a very enjoyable sci-fi movie. And if you don't mind taking your kids to see a little bit of cosmic violence, it's even a good family movie to see. There's not too much in the way of extreme violence or cursing and things like that. It's got a PG-13 rating, so yeah, I think that people should go see this movie. That'll be my final word.
All right, we'll move on to our next topic. Last week when we were discussing San Diego Comic-Con happenings, we talked a bit about DC animated films coming in 2015, and apparently early reports were a bit erroneous. Things were said at the panel following the premiere of Batman Assault on Arkham that were blown out of proportion a bit. I did an article on Dark Knight News this week with some of the corrections, and I, of course, linked it on our blog at multiverseentertainment.wordpress.com because I had done an article last week about the animated film, so it felt incumbent upon me to at least link the Dark Knight News article there, and of course incumbent on us to update our listeners who may have not read the corrected information. Batman vs. Robin is not based on Court of Owls by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. I guess it was said at the panel that this film would include the first animated appearance of the Court of Owls. Maybe they pop in a cameo. Maybe it's in a mid or post-credits stinger to set up the next film. I could very well see the animated film after Batman vs. Robin being Court of Owls as we go along, you know, chronologically with some of the more definitive Batman stories of the past few years. But with the new information come to light, this makes me wonder, with, of course, the many stills of Dick and Damian during the credits of Son of Batman, which I think we pointed out in our previous episode, that I think Batman vs. Robin will probably be a loose adaptation of Grant Morrison's Dick Grayson as Batman, Damian Wayne as Robin era. And they kind of did an episode of that on Batman the Brave and the Bold, and I would really love to see a movie like that. So, yes, in short, it's not a Court of Owls movie. And then the other animated film they have coming in 2015, well, mid to late 2015, would be Justice League Gods and Monsters. And at the panel, they said Bruce Timm is producing, and he came up with the character designs for the film. So maybe it's going to look more Timm-verse than we've seen from a lot of these films. And that got blown out of proportion to where a report said Timm was writing and directing, which is not true. The director is Sam Liu and the screenwriter is Alan Burnett, but if you follow DC animation, you know Alan Burnett's no slouch either, because he's been on board since Batman the Animated Series, you know, Superman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond. He did the latter seasons of the Batman. He's done many of the direct DVD movies, so I would put Alan Burnett in the same category as Bruce Timm in the fact that he's DC animation royalty. Now, perhaps some of my theories from the previous episode will hold up, that maybe this could still possibly be a continuity within the continuity of the Timm-verse of animation. If not, at the very least, we'll see returning actors like Kevin Conroy as Batman, maybe Tim Daly or George Newbern as Superman, Susan Eisenberg as Wonder Woman, etc. That would be very cool. But yeah, that's basically, we don't have too much to expand upon these topics, but it was just very important that we brought the correct information to light, because we spent a decent chunk of our previous episode talking about these DC animated films. But Josh, I know there's not too much to say, but what would you like to say about the corrected information, as it were, regarding these upcoming films?
Well, I was kind of surprised when they were talking about it was going to be, what the name of the film. I thought that it was going to be based on the Dick and Damian arc when Dick Grayson temporarily took over Batman, and it sounds like that's more along the lines of what we probably are going to be getting. However, I was kind of like, Court of Owls, and you're taking a kind of half-step attempt at making a Court of Owls film, and it's one of the most interesting. It's one of the most interesting things that's happened to Batman in maybe the last 5 or so years. I mean, it's definitely not the most interesting thing that's ever happened, but it's this huge, massive story that Snyder started right out of the gate in the New 52 writing, and that story has been, it's really reshaped kind of part of Batman's continuity and part of Batman's, it's a retcon essentially, but it's really revamped, that Batman doesn't know everything that's going on in Gotham, and I think that was one of those things that was like mildly understated in that story, because you have literally Batman he's not fully Bat God yet, I guess, in the comics, and he realizes that he doesn't know everything that there is to know about Gotham, that right under his nose this huge thing's been happening, and that tells you a lot about what they're doing with Batman, and I think that that's something that they should emphasize when they do the animated Court of Owls eventually. But that's got to be a big, massive story, and they got to do it right to respect that story because it's awesome. So I'm glad that it's not. I mean, if they tease it, awesome, great. Why wouldn't they tease it? They should, but they definitely shouldn't have it be the primary focus. But that's pretty much all I have to say. As far as the stuff concerning the other animated film, which was, I forget the name of it, Eric, off the top of my head.
Gods and Monsters. Yeah,
the Gods and Monsters. Yeah, we were kind of talking about it amongst ourselves, and we know that pretty much anything that is done, anything that is done in the DC animated stuff has been very enjoyable. There hasn't really been a whole lot of misses as far as the DC animated films are concerned, but there's hits, and then there's all of the stuff that's done by the same crew that did Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, Justice League Unlimited. These are the superstar hits of their animated universe, and so to say, okay, hey, all of a sudden this guy is going to be creating a film now, and then to have it kind of swept out from under us was kind of a little disappointing. But it is what it is, and I'm sure that the film's going to be a good film anyway. I forget what arc it's supposed to take place on. I have Guardians of the Galaxy on the brain, so my mind's not working very well right now. But I have faith in their animated department, and I think that they're going to do a good job. But they have had some kind of unusual, like in the Justice League War, for example, it was an enjoyable film, but the fact that it didn't have Aquaman and it didn't have a couple little of the beats that the comic book touched on was a little bit of a disappointment. But then we found out, oh hey, guess what? We're getting Throne of Atlantis. It's going to be a Aquaman-centric film. It was like, okay, well that totally makes up for it. Then, why didn't you say that? But obviously they were probably getting ahead of themselves at that point. But that's pretty much it. You want to talk about con stuff?
Yeah, I'll do that in just a moment. One thing popped into my mind while you were talking, and I didn't want to interrupt, is another arc that Batman vs. Robin could be possibly based on, but my gut tells me it's Dick and Damian, because Grant Morrison, one of the collected editions of his arc, was titled Batman vs. Robin. But if we just stay with Bruce and Damian, I was thinking before we get to Court of Owls, they could possibly do a movie based on Batman and Robin Born to Kill from the New 52, which was a very good arc that involved Bruce trying to, if I want to use the word domesticate, but rather pacify Damian and make him more of a hero and not the killer the League of Assassins trained him to be. So that's a possibility they could go with. But yeah, Court of Owls deserves to be its own movie, and I really think there's a strong chance we'll get that for 2016. But okay, yes, con information. During the past few episodes, we've been keeping listeners who may be living in the Metro Detroit area current on the latest con announcements coming up. Great Lakes Comic Con, which is one we've talked about a little bit, which is October 17th and 18th at Macomb Community College in Warren, Michigan, which is one hopefully Josh and I will be attending. We just wanted to update you folks on ticket prices. Tickets will be $10. Considering ticket prices have been raised from $3 for previous shows us that hopefully that this will be a bigger show than they've had in the past, because not many people have heard of Great Lakes Comic Con, but it's filling a fall void for us with the delay of fanfare, which we'll discuss more in a moment. But hopefully they'll get more guests. If you go to GreatLakesComicCon.org, I believe they already have several guests announced. So with us being, 2.5 months away, maybe we'll get more. So it does look to be a bit promising. And then, of course, the other big thing, Detroit Fanfare, which we know to be pretty much the second biggest Comic-Con here in Michigan, usually takes place in the fall and October. We've said that it's been delayed till February of 2015, and now we finally have more info for you. Of course, to keep up with the latest, I'd say go to the Detroit Fanfare Facebook page. But it's going to be February 6th through 8th at the Best Western Sterling Inn in Sterling Heights, Michigan. Now, it's a little farther for guys like Josh and I to travel. But it's curious that they moved away from the Adoba Hotel in Dearborn, Michigan, which is where we're used to seeing this con at, which, of course, was also formerly known as the Hyatt. Hopefully, they'll still be able to land some good guests in February in Michigan. We don't have too much to discuss since no guests have been announced yet, but I still hope that they're able to get Jim Starlin, who was unable to show at the previous fanfare because there were some books I wanted to get signed by him, who, appropriately enough, we're mentioning him in this episode, the creator of Thanos. Before we move on, Josh, what are your thoughts about fanfares moving to another location, and I wonder if they'll incorporate the indoor water park into any of the festivities, but what do you think, and do you have any bits to add about Great Lakes Comic Con as well?
Well, I am a little disappointed that it's a little bit farther away. Dearborn's probably only about a 15, 20-minute ride from where I live. So I don't like having to go super, super, super far to do anything, really, but especially to go do things that I want to do. It really sucks in terms of that. But I guess I'm going to have to look at the facility, because the Adoba is a gigantic place, and it was really good for even a much larger venue. Maybe not much larger, but I guess more prominent, for lack of a better word, venue than Fanfare has become, even though it's become a fairly decent venue as far as a comic convention is concerned. It could be bigger than it is, and being a hotel, people can stay there. Being a hotel, they have multiple floors where they have multiple things going on. It's broken up where they have conference rooms and certain things happening in completely opposite sides of the building than they do the main part of the convention, which is a nice way to break up the crowd. So it was a really nice place to have a convention. But as far as moving it, I guess we're just gonna have to see how the new venue looks. I mean, obviously, it's not gonna keep me from going. It's in February, so it's right around my birthday. So we're gonna, I'm gonna probably maybe have a little extra money on hand. Just I don't know. occasionally, get a card from mom, get a card from grandpa, whatever. Who knows? Maybe I'll have a couple extra bucks to spend. But I don't know. We'll have to see. I just think water park and comic books, and I'm terrified immediately. It's a little scary. But I doubt that they're obviously going to be anywhere near that. But I could imagine, just some parent not paying attention to their asshole kid, as the kid just wet dripping runs through the comic section and just starts getting a bunch of shit destroyed. I can only imagine. But who knows? It probably won't happen. I think more realistically, it's going to be drunken morons at Comic-Con drowning in a pool. But that's just my perspective. But yeah, we'll have to see. I'm a little disappointed still about the February move. That's a cold month in Michigan for a pool party. But again, we'll have to wait and see. It could be an awesome convention spot, so we'll just have to wait.
And hopefully there's not a huge blizzard or polar vortex at the time of the convention.
Yes, polar vortex. If this is a word that most people internationally or nationally are not aware of, and you should be, Michigan had its worst winter ever in terms of snowfall last year, and so now we can finally tell all those old folks who say, you've never seen a bad winter, son, we can tell them to fuck off. And secondly, it's terrifying that, yeah, we could essentially get snowed out of a gigantic convention, which is a completely plausible situation. But, yeah, any new comics I think we were going to touch on shortly?
Yeah, not too big of a week for comics. I know when you get to the 5th week of a month, there aren't as many. That's when they tend to drop annuals, and I don't really buy annuals as much. The only thing I really picked up off the new rack this week was Justice League number 32, which is, well, rather overdue because we've been a little behind with the delays of Forever Evil, and Ivan Rice was originally solicited to do this arc of Justice League, and Doug Mahnke, who's pretty much DC's go-to guy whenever they need someone to do a last-minute fill-in. And, well, he does a rather good job. He was also regular artist on Green Lantern for a few years, so it's not like Doug Mahnke's like, oh, this is just some slouch that we get when we really need him. No, he's a top artist, but Josh can back me up. When they need someone at the last minute that can get their work in on time, it's Doug Mahnke. But he did a very good job, and another reason I think Rice isn't on it is because he was tapped for issue 1 of Multiversity, which ships later in August, and then Rice will be back for the next arc of Justice League. But it was a decent issue of Justice League. It focused a lot on the Doom Patrol, who I'm not a fan of, but maybe Johns has bigger plans for these characters going forward, and we needed to fit them into an issue. We got a little bit of the Justice League dynamic going. We got a little more with Superwoman from the Crime Syndicate and her baby. She's got the bun in the oven and what's being planned for that. We got a little bit of a teaser of what's to come with some big cosmic war crisis that DC is building to in 2015 with similarly Darkseid's making a comeback, as Bleeding Cool has been pointing out. I'd probably give the issue like a 7.5 because it didn't have everything that I wanted from, let's say, a Justice League book, but it's Jeff Johns, and he always puts his best effort forward, and we were moving a little forward in the current arc. I just want to see more of how Luthor came on board as a prominent member of the Justice League and why Superman was ousted, and I think it probably has a little something more to do than just the doomed arc that's going on. Review-wise, the only thing I posted a review for this week was over on Comic Book Movie, which was something very different. Diary of a Girl Next Door, Betty, which was more a prose book. I would have compared it to Diary of a Wimpy Kid in the review, but I'm not familiar with the Diary of a Wimpy Kid franchise. But it seemed like something it was probably comparable to, but I just, not being totally familiar, it would have seemed a bit of an irresponsible comparison for me to make. But it wasn't really my cup of tea, but in the review I said that if you're someone who wants to get their daughter or niece, because this is a book that's very much geared toward 9 to 12-year-old girls, if you want to get someone that age into Archie books, you know, Betty and Veronica, or if you're just a die-hard Betty fan yourself, maybe you want to pick it up as something that's, you know, a little separate from comics, but it's still very much in that world. You know, go for it. You know, and it might be also a gateway to get young girls into comics in general. You know, have them start out reading Archie, and then, you know, they'll get into superheroes eventually. But I didn't give it a score out of 10 because, like I said, I'm not the target demographic, and I just feel that I wouldn't be able to score it properly. But give my review a read over at CBM. It's also linked on a Podcast for All Seasons Facebook page, but that could be up your alley. I don't have any other trade reviews on the horizon until possibly as far away as September, but this next week has some interesting stuff coming out, but you know, sorry I'm not as able to talk comics as in depth this week, but August definitely looks to be an exciting month for some new releases. Is there anything you want to add about new comics before we close out the show, Josh?
No, I actually haven't picked up this week's books. I'm going to do that right when I get done with this here podcast. I'm going to go to the shop and pick up the new books. But I have been actually touting with Blasts to the Past. I've been downloaded Mike Mignola's Hellboy chronology, so I've been trying to get some of those books, put them in chronological order, and then I am going to start reading some of those. Never really read a lot of Hellboy. I've seen the animated films and the live-action films, and I'm going to just try to go through that. I kind of enjoy that universe, or at least the idea of that universe. I really like the concept of occultism and outside of the realm of pure superheroism. I like to read all kinds of comic books. I've read everything from Sherlock Holmes comic books to I enjoy the current Shadow and a few others. But I'm looking forward to finishing up the Doom Dark pretty soon here, and I'm going to go pick up my books when I get done. But I don't have a whole lot to mention on new comic books. But I will be picking up the annuals that I know Aquaman Annual 2 is out, and I'm looking forward to that one as well. It's supposed to feature Wonder Woman. They're going to be fighting some ancient gods, so that's very epic and awesome, and will probably be a pretty good read.
All right, I'll start to close it out, but I forgot to mention this while we're talking new comics, because I wanted to review Letter 44 Volume 1 from Charles Soule, but as I've said, the digital proof for the review copy it just vanished off of one of the sites that I get my digital proofs from 3 weeks before release, and usually they don't take them down until the day of release, so I was disappointed I wasn't able to review Letter 44. I do want to pick up the trade once I get the extra money, but it's getting a lot of acclaim. Charles Soule's a great writer, so even though I haven't read it, I will just say, based on feedback and from reading his other works, if you can pick up Letter 44 Volume 1 now, do so, because you probably want to get in on the ground floor before the TV show starts. Yeah, just kind of disappointed I didn't get to write up a review for that one. But that's going to do it for this week. We'll be back sometime soon, hopefully with some special guests we've been talking about having. Maybe we'll do a review episode later this month of Sin City: A Dame to Kill For, if we're able to accommodate it into the show's schedule. But before then, just be sure to check out our blog page at multiverseentertainment.wordpress.com and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/apodcastforallseasons. That's going to do it for me. Thanks for listening, and I will turn it over to you, Josh.
Yeah, we're going to close out. I appreciate you guys listening. Go check out Guardians, and also check out our Facebook page, definitely. We got a lot of cool stuff other than the podcast on there. Eric and myself are fairly regularly posting things. And one of the cool things I was actually going to have Eric mention was Batman vs. Superman, more set photo leaks out of Detroit. Now, it is hard to tell what of destruction was created for the film and what part of the destruction is just Detroit, the city as of itself. But it was some pretty neat photos, and we got to see a Wayne Financial logo on a placard that had apparently fallen in the destruction. So that's kind of neat. Definitely check that out on our Facebook page. I know Eric posted a link on that. But that'll be it for us today. Go get some comics, people. Go see some cool comic book movies, and check us out on Facebook, and we'll keep you posted on the latest and the greatest. Have a good day.